I never thought I would be telling this story. For most of my life, I was just like anyone else, focused on my responsibilities, my family, and the everyday tasks that filled my days. But something happened to me that I cannot ignore, something that shook me to my core and changed the way I see everything. I died, and in those moments I saw things that most people could never imagine. It was not just a near-death experience. It was a revelation, a warning, and a message I was meant to share. On that day, October 3rd, I woke up like any other morning. The sun peeked through my window, casting a warm glow across my room. I stretched, thanked God for another day, and prepared for work. I had no idea that before the sun would set, I would be pulled from this world and shown things that would change my life forever. It was an ordinary day that would lead to an extraordinary experience, one that I now know was not just for me, but for you as well. As I drove home that evening, tired but satisfied with the day's work, the rain began to fall lightly against my windshield. The world outside was peaceful, the hum of my car and the soft gospel music playing on the radio, making me feel at ease. But in an instant, everything shifted. Headlights appeared in my vision, too close, too fast. There was no time to react. The impact was violent. Metal crunched, glass shattered, and my body was thrown forward with incredible force. Then, nothing. Silence. Darkness. At first I thought it was a dream. There was no pain, no sound, only an overwhelming sense of weightlessness. When I opened my eyes, I saw something impossible. I was looking down at my own body, trapped in the wreckage of my car. Paramedics were rushing toward me, their voices urgent, their movements frantic. But I was not inside that broken body anymore. I was outside, watching. I felt no fear, no panic, just an eerie sense of detachment, as if I had been freed from something heavy. Then, I saw a light. But this was no ordinary light. It was alive, radiant, warm. It called to me, not with words, but with something deeper, a knowing, a pull that I could not resist. I moved toward it effortlessly, as if I were being carried. The world I knew, the pain, the chaos, it all faded away. And in that moment, I knew something beyond any doubt. I was not alone. What happened next changed everything I believed about life, about death, and about the reality we think we know. I met someone who answered questions I did not even know I had. He showed me truths that shattered the illusions of this world. He revealed the deception that is already unfolding all around us, hidden in plain sight. And he gave me a mission, to come back and tell you, this is not just my story. This is a warning, a message of hope, a call to wake up before it is too late. What I saw was not just for me, it was for you. Now, I must share it. Are you ready to hear the truth? The moment I realized I was outside my body, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I should have been terrified, confused, desperate to return, but I wasn't. Instead, I felt lighter than I had ever felt before, as if a burden I had carried my whole life had suddenly been lifted. The wreckage of my car was below me, the rain shimmering like tiny diamonds in the flashing red and blue lights of the emergency vehicles. I saw my own lifeless body, still and broken, but I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel loss. I felt as if I had stepped into a different reality, one that had been there all along, just beyond the veil of what we call life. As I hovered above the scene, I noticed something incredible. Everything was clearer, sharper, more real than it had ever been before. I could see details I had never noticed in the physical world. The expressions on the paramedics' faces, the movement of each raindrop as it fell, the subtle glow of energy surrounding everything. It was as if I had been blind my entire life, and only now was I truly seeing. Then, I saw her, my mother. She had passed away 5 years earlier, yet there she was, standing near the ambulance, watching everything unfold with a look of deep love and understanding. She didn't speak, but in her eyes, I felt a message. You are not alone. That was when I knew. I was dead, or at least I had left behind the world I knew. But instead of fear, I felt a strange calmness, as if I had just woken up from a long, exhausting dream. It was then that I saw it, the light. It was unlike any light I had ever seen before. It didn't shine like the sun or flicker like a flame. It was alive, pulsing with warmth and power. It wasn't just in front of me. It was everywhere, surrounding me, filling me. drawing me toward it, and for the first time I felt something even stronger than peace. I felt home. As I moved toward the light, I heard a voice. It was not a sound, not in the way we hear with our ears. It was something deeper, something that resonated within my very soul. It was a voice that spoke to the core of who I was, and in that instant, I knew exactly who it was. Dorothy, come. Just 2 words, but they held the power of eternity. I didn't need to ask who was calling me. I didn't need to see him to know. It was Jesus. The moment I heard his voice, my entire being responded. I wasn't just drawn toward the light. I was pulled, as if a deep longing inside of me had been awakened. I moved effortlessly, weightlessly, toward the source of that voice, that presence, that love unlike anything I had ever known. And as I drew closer, the world I had left behind faded completely. The pain, the confusion, the worries of my earthly life, gone. All that remained was the overwhelming reality of what lay before me. For the first time, I understood something I had never even questioned before. This world, the one I had always known, the one I had believed was the ultimate reality, was only a shadow of something much greater. The truth was so much bigger, so much deeper than I had ever imagined. And now, I was about to see it with my own eyes. The closer I moved toward the light, the more I could feel his presence. It wasn't just warmth, it wasn't just love. It was the very essence of truth itself. Every part of me responded to it, as if I had been waiting my entire life to be in this moment, even though I had never known it. Then, I saw him, and no words, no earthly language could ever describe what it was like to look upon the face of Jesus. His presence was overwhelming, but not in a way that caused fear. It was the kind of presence that made every part of my soul recognize that I was standing before something holy, something eternal. His eyes, oh, his eyes, held the depth of the universe in them. They were not just eyes that saw, they were eyes that knew. Every moment of my life, every joy, every sorrow, every hidden thought, I realized he had seen it all. And yet, he did not look at me with judgment. He looked at me with love. I fell to my knees, or at least I felt like I did, though I was not in a body as I had known before. I didn't fall because I was forced to. I fell because every fiber of my being knew that this was the only response to such holiness, such love. It was not fear that made me bow. It was something deeper, something that felt like an instinct, as natural as breathing. I had no words, but I didn't need them. He already knew everything inside of me. Then, he spoke again. Dorothy, rise. His voice was unlike any sound I had ever heard. It carried authority, yet it was filled with tenderness. It was the voice of someone who had known me my entire life, who had walked with me even when I had not seen him. As I stood, I realized something else. His light was not just around me, it was inside me. It filled every part of me, washing away everything that had ever been broken, everything that had ever been lost. I wanted to stay there forever. I wanted to remain in that presence, to never leave. But then I saw something in his eyes. Sorrow. It was not sorrow for himself, but sorrow for the world. And in an instant, I understood that this moment was not just for me. There was something he needed to show me, something he needed me to understand. The peace I felt was real, but so was the urgency. Come, he said. There is something you must see. And as he reached out his hand, everything around us shifted. The light stretched into something new, something vast, and suddenly, I was no longer standing in that heavenly presence. I was being pulled into a vision of the world as it truly was. As Jesus took my hand, the world around us shifted. The overwhelming light of his presence faded, replaced by a deep, eerie darkness. It was not just the absence of light. It was a living, creeping force, wrapping itself around everything. I was no longer in that place of perfect peace. I was somewhere else entirely. And for the first time since my journey began, I felt something heavy pressing down on me. A weight, a knowing, a truth I had never seen before. Before me stretched a great city, one that looked just like any modern metropolis. Towering buildings, flashing signs, streets filled with people moving about their daily lives. But something was wrong. There was no joy, no warmth. People walked with empty expressions, Their eyes locked onto glowing screens in their hands or implanted beneath their skin. No one spoke. No one smiled. They moved like shadows, trapped in their own isolated worlds. And above them, hovering like a veil over the entire city, was the darkness. It was not a physical darkness. It was something spiritual, something unseen by human eyes, yet it controlled everything. I saw creatures, dark, shapeless figures, whispering into the ears of the people, filling their minds with distractions, fear, and lies. I saw chains, invisible to those wearing them, binding people to their screens, to their routines, to a system that promised comfort but delivered only control. And worst of all, I saw that they had no idea. They believed they were free. Jesus stood beside me, his expression filled with sorrow. "This is the world as it is," he said. "A world where truth has been exchanged for convenience, where deception has become the foundation of society." I looked deeper and saw churches, their doors wide open, yet something was missing. There was no power in them, no presence of God. Instead, pastors stood before their congregations, speaking not the word, but messages designed to keep people comfortable, to keep them blind. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but I knew they wouldn't hear me. They had been lulled into a sleep so deep that they did not even realize they were no longer awake. "Why?" I asked Jesus, my heart breaking. "Why don't they see it?" He turned to me, his eyes filled with both love and urgency. "Because they do not seek me," he said. "They trust the wisdom of the world over the truth of God. They do not ask, so they do not see." Suddenly, I saw something even more terrifying. Above the city, beyond the darkness, there was something watching. A presence, a force that radiated power and control. It was not just ruling over the city, it was guiding it, shaping it. And I knew without being told that this was not human. This was the force behind it all. "This is only the beginning," Jesus said. "Come, there is more you must see." The city faded, and in its place I saw something else, something worse. A future, not far from now, where the darkness had fully taken control. The people who once moved through life unaware were now completely bound by it. The glowing screens they had once carried were now inside them. A small, shining implant rested beneath their skin, pulsing with information, tracking their every move. No one questioned it. No one resisted. They had accepted it willingly. Everywhere, massive screens displayed the image of a leader. He was charismatic, confident, and people looked at him with adoration. He spoke of unity, of peace, of a future without war, without poverty, without suffering. And the people believed him. They followed without hesitation, without question. But I saw what they could not. Behind his eyes, there was something else. A darkness, a deception so powerful that it had wrapped itself around the entire world. Jesus stood beside me watching. "They believe they are free," he said, "but they have given away their freedom for security, their truth for comfort. And now, they belong to the system." I watched in horror as people lined up in great crowds, stepping forward willingly to receive their final mark. At first, it was a choice. Then, it was a necessity. And finally, it was a requirement. No one could buy, sell, or participate in society without it. I turned to Jesus, my heart pounding. "Is this the mark?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "But this is how they will be led to accept it. Step by step. Deception by deception. First, they will make it convenient. Then, they will make it necessary. And finally, they will make it mandatory." I felt my soul tremble. The people didn't see it. They were walking willingly into their own enslavement, believing they were stepping into a better future. Then I saw something even worse. Those who refused were cast out, unable to participate in society. They were mocked, ridiculed, called dangerous, and outdated. And then, they were hunted. The world did not want those who questioned. It did not want those who saw the truth. "They will call it progress," Jesus said, "but it is control. And those who refuse will suffer for my name." A deep sorrow filled me. "Lord," I whispered, "how do we stop this?" He looked at me with love, but also with a firm resolve. "You cannot stop what has been written," he said, "but you can warn them. You can wake those who are willing to see, and you can strengthen those who will stand." The vision changed again. And this time I saw something different. I saw warriors. Not with swords, not with weapons, but with truth. They were scattered across the world, small in number, but powerful in spirit. They shined with a light that pushed back the darkness around them. They spoke, and chains fell. They prayed, and strongholds were broken. They were ordinary people, mothers, fathers, workers, students. But they carried something the world could not silence: the power of God. "These are my warriors," Jesus said, "not with violence, but with truth. And when the world turns against them, I will be their shield." I saw them standing, even as the world called them crazy, even as they were persecuted. And yet, they did not falter. They did not bow. And for the first time since the vision began, I felt hope. But Jesus' eyes grew serious. "Many will fall," he said. "Even among those who believe, some will not stand. Fear will cause many to turn away. But those who endure, those who remain faithful, they will shine like the stars in the kingdom of my Father." The weight of what I had seen pressed upon me. The war was not coming. It was already here. And many were already losing without realizing they were even fighting. "You must tell them," Jesus said. "Some will listen, some will not. But the truth must be spoken." Before me, I saw two paths. One was wide, smooth, and filled with people walking joyfully, unaware of where it led. But at the end of it, I saw darkness, an abyss that swallowed them whole. They didn't even see it until it was too late. The other path was narrow, filled with obstacles, difficult to walk. But at the end of it, I saw Jesus, standing with open arms. "Most will choose the easy path," he said. "It is comfortable, it is safe, and it requires no sacrifice. But those who seek me, those who trust me, they will take the harder road, and I will lead them home." Tears filled my eyes. I knew which path the world was choosing, but I also knew that there was still time to wake some. The vision faded, and I was back in his presence. The weight of everything I had seen was heavy upon me. "You must go back," he said. My heart broke. "Lord, I don't want to leave. I want to stay with you." He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Your time is not yet finished. They must hear the truth before it is too late." And with that, I felt myself pulled away, back into my body, back into the world I had left behind. The moment I gasped for air, I felt the crushing weight of my body again. My chest ached, my limbs were heavy, and the beeping of hospital machines filled my ears. The sterile smell of antiseptic burned my nose, and I could hear muffled voices around me, voices filled with shock, relief, and disbelief. My family stood over me, their eyes wide with emotion. Tears streamed down my sister's face as she clutched my hand. "Dorothy, oh my God, you're back." But even as I felt their touch, as I looked into their familiar faces, I knew something had changed. I was not the same person who had left. I had seen too much. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice weak. I had no words for what I had just experienced. How could I explain the vastness of what I had seen? How could I put into words the urgency, the warning, the overwhelming truth that had been shown to me? I had been sent back for a reason, but already I could feel the resistance, the doubt in their eyes, the skepticism in their expressions. "You were unconscious for days," my brother said, shaking his head. "We thought we lost you." But I knew the truth. I had been lost, but not in the way they thought. I had been beyond, and I had been sent back with a mission. The doctors called it a miracle. They said my injuries should have been fatal, that there was no logical explanation for my survival. But I knew better. My body had been broken, but my spirit had been carried by the hands of the one who had sent me back. And now I had to find a way to tell them, to tell the world, what I had seen. But how do you explain the unseen to those who refuse to see? How do you speak of spiritual war to a world that believes only in what it can touch? I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. "Lord, give me the strength. If you sent me back, show me how to do what you have asked." A deep stillness filled my heart, a quiet knowing that the battle had only just begun. The hardest part wasn't dying. The hardest part was waking up to a world that did not know it was asleep. The days that followed were the most difficult of my life. My body was healing, but my soul carried a weight heavier than any physical pain. I had seen too much to ever go back to the way things were. My eyes had been opened. And now, every conversation, every news report, every interaction in the world around me screamed of the deception I had seen so clearly beyond the veil. It was everywhere, woven into society, into technology, into entertainment, even into the church. And the worst part? No one seemed to notice. I tried to tell my family, my friends, my pastor. At first, they listened, their expressions soft with concern. But then, I saw the shift. The polite nods, the uneasy glances, the forced smiles. Maybe it was just a dream, my sister said gently, as if she were speaking to a child. A near-death experience can do strange things to the brain. I wanted to shake her, to make her see. It wasn't a dream, I whispered. It was real. He was real. My pastor was kinder, but even he was hesitant. I believe God can reveal things to us, he said. But we must be careful not to be alarmists. The Bible warns us about false visions. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of frustration pressing down on me. False? Had I imagined the sorrow in Jesus' eyes? Had I made up the chains I saw wrapped around the world? Pastor, I said, my voice trembling, this is already happening. It's not coming. It's here. He sighed, patting my hand like I was an emotional woman in need of calming. Then we will pray. But you must not live in fear. Fear. That was the problem. It wasn't fear that burned inside of me. It was urgency. It was a desperate need to wake people up before it was too late, but they weren't ready to listen. And I realized then what Jesus had meant when he said, "Some will listen, some will not." I withdrew from the noise of the world and spent my days in prayer, seeking wisdom, clarity, and strength. If the world would not listen, then I had to find those who would. I began to search, and to my surprise, I wasn't alone. Scattered across the world were others who had seen the same things, who had been given dreams, visions, warnings. They were ordinary people, teachers, mothers, students, workers, yet they carried the same urgency, the same fire that burned inside of me. And together we began to speak. We shared what we had seen, what had been revealed to us. We spoke in whispers at first, careful not to draw too much attention, knowing that the world would call us conspiracy theorists, fearmongers, radicals. But the more we spoke, the more others began to wake up. People who had felt a shift in the world but hadn't been able to put it into words. People who had noticed the creeping control, the growing deception, the silent war happening all around them. And slowly, a remnant began to rise. But with that awakening came resistance. The enemy did not want people to see. Every attempt to share the truth was met with mockery, censorship, and suppression. It was as if an invisible hand was working tirelessly to keep people blind, to keep them distracted, to make them doubt what their own spirits were trying to tell them. And that's when I understood. The battle wasn't just for knowledge. It was for faith. Because if people knew who they truly were in Christ, the deception would lose its power. I saw the warning signs everywhere. A world pushing further into control, selling fear as safety, technology advancing not to free people, but to enslave them, the slow erosion of personal freedoms, the subtle conditioning of society to accept what once would have been unthinkable. And I knew what was coming next. Jesus had shown me how it would unfold, step by step, inch by inch, until people no longer remembered what it meant to be truly free. It would begin with small conveniences, harmless and logical, a digital identification system, a cashless economy, a more efficient way to track health and finances. People would accept it, not realizing they were surrendering their autonomy piece by piece. Then it would become necessary. To buy, to sell, to travel, to work. It would no longer be optional. And finally, it would be mandatory. By the time people realized what had happened, it would be too late. I saw how even the churches would be used to push the narrative, twisting scripture to justify compliance. It's for the greater good, they would say. God would want us to be responsible citizens, and those who refused, they would be labeled as dangerous, extreme, enemies of progress. They would be cast out, cut off, and eventually hunted. It was not paranoia, it was prophecy, and it was already beginning. But despite the darkness I had seen, despite the warnings and the sorrow in Jesus' eyes, there was still hope. Because in the midst of it all, a light remained. A remnant of people who refused to bow to the system, who stood firm in truth no matter the cost. These were not powerful people by the world's standards. They were not wealthy, not famous. But in the spiritual realm, they were giants. Jesus had shown them to me, the warriors who would rise in the final days. They would not fight with weapons, but with truth. They would not seek war, but they would not conform. And though they would be mocked, ridiculed, and persecuted, they would endure, because they belonged not to this world, but to the kingdom of God. And I knew then, without a doubt, that my purpose was to stand among them. The battle was here. The deception was growing. But those who stood with Jesus would never be alone. And when the final choice came, the choice between comfort and truth, between the world and the kingdom, only those who had already prepared their hearts would know which path to take. Now the question remains, will you be one of them? I could feel the weight of time pressing down on me. Every day, the world moved closer to the future I had seen, and yet, most people remained unaware. The deception was not coming. It was already here, creeping into every aspect of life, wrapping itself around society like a slow-moving fog. People did not question it because it did not come with force or violence. It came with convenience. It came with comfort. And that was the most dangerous trap of all. I watched as governments introduced new systems, promising security, stability, and efficiency. Digital currencies, biometric identification, AI-driven governance. Each step seemed logical, even beneficial. People welcomed these changes with open arms, unaware that they were surrendering their freedoms, one compromise at a time. It's just the way the world is evolving, they would say. But I had seen where it led. I had seen the chains before they became visible. I had seen the final step, the moment when compliance was no longer optional. Even within the church, the shift was happening. Messages of holiness and repentance were replaced with teachings that comforted but did not convict. The warnings of Scripture were dismissed as outdated, irrelevant to modern society. God is love, they would say, twisting the truth to justify inaction. And those who dared to speak up, they were silenced, mocked, labeled as extreme. The enemy had done something cunning. He had made deception look like progress and truth look like hatred. And the world had fallen for it. But I also saw something else, a stirring, a quiet awakening in the hearts of those who still sought the voice of God. These were not the ones who followed blindly. They questioned, they prayed, they tested the spirits, as Scripture commanded. They recognized the patterns, the warnings, the spiritual battle happening behind the veil of politics and technology. And though they were small in number, they carried something powerful, discernment. It was in them that I found hope. For the remnant would not be deceived. They would stand when others bowed. They would endure when others conformed. And when the world turned against them, when persecution became the cost of truth, they would not waver. They had already counted the cost. They had already made their choice. And I knew without a doubt that these were the ones Jesus had shown me. These were the ones who would shine in the final days. The battle was becoming clearer. It was not about politics. It was not about technology. It was not about race or class or nationality. It was about allegiance. The choice was no longer distant. It was happening now, quietly shaping the world before the final moment of decision arrived. I watched as people made their choices, some without even realizing they had done so. Some embraced the system, trusting that it had their best interests at heart. Others felt an unease, a knowing deep within them that something was not right. I saw families divided. Those who questioned were called irrational, conspiratorial, fearful. But it was not fear that drove them. It was awareness. And awareness was dangerous to those who sought control. I saw restrictions tighten. Information became more filtered, carefully curated to guide public perception. Dissent was erased, labeled as misinformation, and those who spoke against the agenda were branded as threats. I saw a world where silence became the price of acceptance, and I knew that soon, silence would not be enough. Jesus had told me, they will make it convenient, then they will make it necessary, and finally, they will make it mandatory. I saw this prophecy unfolding in real time. What began as a personal choice became a social expectation. Then, it became a requirement. Those who did not comply lost access to banking, to employment, to travel. At first, the world justified it. If you don't like the rules, just opt out, they would say. But when opting out meant losing the ability to live, was it really a choice? I wanted to scream, to shake people awake. Could they not see what was happening? Could they not recognize the pattern? But deception is not merely about hiding the truth. It is about making the lie feel more real, more comfortable, more reasonable. And by the time the lie fully revealed itself, it was too late for most to escape. That was why Jesus had sent me back, not to force people to see, but to tell them before the moment of decision was upon them. Because once the system was fully in place, choosing the truth would cost everything. And yet, I saw those who would stand. I saw those who would not bow no matter the cost. They had already died to the world, so the world had no power over them. They had chosen their master long before the final test came, and because of that, they would endure. One night I had a dream. I saw two crowds, one vast, stretching as far as the eye could see, moving in unison toward a great city. The other was small, scattered, moving toward a narrow gate, a place of refuge beyond what the world could see. The larger crowd did not even realize they were being led. They laughed, they talked, they embraced their comforts, believing they were walking toward something greater. But the road they traveled was smooth, easy, effortless. They did not notice the shadows growing around them, the unseen chains tightening with every step. The smaller group walked a different path. Their road was rough, filled with obstacles. They stumbled, they struggled, they suffered, they carried burdens, wounds from battles fought against unseen forces. But there was a difference in their eyes. They were not blind. They saw what the others did not. They knew where the wide road led, and they knew that the struggle of the narrow path was worth it. And at the end of that road, I saw Jesus, waiting with open arms. Then, I saw the final moment of choice. A barrier rose between the two groups. The large crowd could no longer see the small one, nor could they hear the warnings. They had crossed the point of no return, and I understood. There would come a moment when those who had chosen comfort would no longer have the chance to turn back, and those who had chosen truth would be sealed in the light of the one they had followed. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. The message was clear. The time to choose was now. Not when the final test came, not when the world demanded allegiance. By then, it would be too late. The time to stand was before the moment of pressure, before the storm, because those who waited until the battle arrived to decide where they stood would already be lost. I knew then why I had been sent back. It was not to change prophecy. It was not to fight the system. It was to speak the truth while there was still time. It was to remind people that deception does not announce itself. It comes slowly, carefully, until it no longer seems like deception at all. And it was to remind those who belonged to Jesus that they were never alone, that the world may turn against them, but heaven was waiting with open arms. Some would listen, some would not. But the truth had to be spoken, because soon, the choice would no longer be a future event. It would be now. Everything I have shared with you is not just my story. It is a warning, a message, and an urgent call to wake up. The deception is not coming. It is already here, wrapping itself around the world, leading people down a path they do not even realize they are on. But now, you have seen the truth. You have heard what was shown to me, and the question remains, what will you do with it? The time to choose is not someday in the future. It is now. Every small decision, every compromise, every time you remain silent when you should speak, it all shapes the path you are walking. Will you follow the wide road, the one that offers comfort and security but leads to destruction? Or will you take the narrow path, the one that is difficult, that costs something, but that leads to the only one who can truly save? Jesus has already won the battle. The enemy has no real power except the power people willingly give him. And that is why the greatest war is not fought with weapons, but with truth. The enemy cannot force you to believe his lies. He can only make them feel so reasonable, so comfortable, that you accept them without question. But now you know. Now you see. And once you see, you can never go back to blindness. I am here to tell you that you are not alone. There is a remnant rising, people across the world who are waking up, who refuse to be deceived, who are standing firm no matter the cost. and you can be one of them. You were not created to conform. You were not created to walk blindly into the plans of the world. You were created for a purpose, to be a light in the darkness, to stand when others bow. And when the moment of decision comes, you will not stand alone. But standing starts now. It starts with faith. It starts with knowing Jesus for yourself, not through religion, not through routine, but through a personal, unshakable relationship with Him. If you do not know Him, seek Him now. If you do know Him, go deeper. The time of lukewarm faith is over. The time of comfortable Christianity is ending. This is the time to be bold, to be fearless, to be ready. If this message has spoken to you, do not keep it to yourself. Share it. Speak the truth, even when it costs you. Strengthen your faith because the battle is not coming. It is here. And above all, do not wait until it is too late. Choose now whom you will serve. Choose now where you will stand. Subscribe to this channel, not just to stay connected, but because we are in this together. Follow Jesus, not just in words, but in action. Share this message with those you love, because the time is short. And remember, no matter how dark the world gets, the light of God will always be greater. Those who belong to Him will never be abandoned. I love you all. You are not alone. And no matter what happens, no matter how much the world changes, Jesus remains the same. Stand strong. Stay awake. Keep your eyes on Him. Until next time, may God bless you, guide you, and give you the courage to walk the narrow path.